Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Anthony Vicino. Hey Anthony, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic, man. I'm fantastic.
Good.
We were having a great chat before we got in here, talking about all kinds of random stuff, name stuff, how to pronounce names and whatever. So we had a blast before we even started. But we're gonna promise we'll try and stick on real estate stuff today. It might be challenging though, because we had a
It's gonna be a tricky one, I think.
Yeah.
But we're gonna do our best.
Well, before we dive into your story and kind of what you've been up to, do you want to give us an idea, a little bit of a bio about yourself?
Yeah, I think from the 50,000 foot view, the thing that most people know about me is that I am an author. I started as a science fiction and fantasy author, and now I've kind of transitioned into more nonfiction and more around personal development, mindset, teaching on real estate investing. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And serial is a weird word to use in that context, but I've just started and exited many businesses at this point. And so it feels like that fits. And the thing that I'm most probably known for at the moment is my real estate investing. So I have a multifamily acquisition firm up here in the Twin Cities, and we buy apartment buildings, and it's awesome.
Very cool. I'm always interested with people that are entrepreneurs. Is that something that you've always been into? Were you, like at school, were you like selling candy or trying to sell stuff at school? So how did you end up, where did that come from, do you think? Was it just a lifestyle thing for you, or what was it?
Well, here's what's really interesting. Like, you hear these stories of like Gary Vaynerchuk, who'd like pull out the flowers of his neighbor's yard and then sell it back to them, like that type of entrepreneurship. And that was never me. Like, here's the thing is I have severe ADHD. And so coming out of college, I was a really bad employee, bad student, really not a very good friend either. I was like really undisciplined and unfocused. And so I was getting fired from a lot of jobs. So the corporate route really wasn't going to work for me, but I wasn't thinking along the lines of entrepreneurship. I was just thinking like, I can't work for other people. That's all it was. I don't get the adrenaline rush of closing the deal or making the sale. Like, I don't really love that stuff, but I love the freedom that's afforded from entrepreneurship. And I get to make my life, my schedule, and like dedicate it to the things that I want to work on. And honestly, if not for an unfortunate series of events, I would probably still not be in entrepreneurship. But I had this fiance, she left me. And then I found myself living in the back of a van with a ton of debt and really, really sad, like, because, you're alone in the world, and that sucks. And a friend saw me in my wallowing, and he's like, "Hey, let's do something, man. Let's build a business." And I was like, "Build a business? What the heck? No, I don't know anything about. I've never done this." At that point, I was an author. I was like, that's what I knew is how to write. And he's like, "Yeah, let's start a high-rise window washing company." And I was like, "Okay, that's weird." But that was actually a really interesting use of a skill set that I had, which was, for a decade, I was a professional rock climber. And so suddenly when he was like, "Let's start a window washing company," I was like, that could work. We know ropes, we know rope systems. We can get up there faster and easier than other people. We can wash these windows cheaper. And we had this network of other rock climbers who needed jobs, and they needed flexibility. And we're like, "Hey, let's build this thing." And next thing I know, that did really, really well. And then we sold it and then moved on to the next thing. But if not for that guy just looking at me in my sad puppy dog state and being like, "Hey, let's do something," I probably might still be in that van down by the river.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, what a great guy. And it's interesting. Like, sometimes just one person can change the trajectory of your life, right? Literally, all you need is one person sometimes to do something, to tell you something, to guide you, to show you something, and it can really change the trajectory, right? That's very cool. When did real estate come in? When and how?
Real estate's interesting. I feel like the universe was at multiple times in my life trying to get me to go down the real estate route, and I just wasn't paying attention to the universe's signals. So like in college, my roommate and his dad were buying and flipping houses, and I would live with them and I would help on the construction side. And so I got to live and see that world. But all I learned from that was that I can swing the hammer, but I can't hit the nail. Like, construction is really not my jam. And so that was my first experience with real estate. And I thought, this is not for me. I'm not interested in this. And I think this is what a lot of people think about when they think of real estate is single family homes, fix and flips. You watch it on HGTV. They take like a hobo's shanty and then they turn into a McMansion and they make millions of dollars. It's great. And I was like, this is not my thing. And so I went a different direction until maybe 7, 8 years later. Real estate tried to cross my path again when a buddy came and he was buying up quads and triplexes. And he's like, let's do this together. And I said, no, I'm not interested in doing that, but I'll give you money so that you can go do that. And so that was like passively investing in my first things before I even really knew what that meant. I was really just trying to support a buddy as he was pursuing this thing that he was interested in. And then a couple years later, after I had gone really deep in my entrepreneurship journey, I was hit with the question one day. I was living back in Minnesota. I was driving into downtown Minneapolis and I was looking up the skyline at the beautiful skyscrapers. And I was like, who owns those things? Like legitimately at that point, I was like 30 years old and I had no idea who owns a skyscraper. It had never crossed my mind. And so then I started just trying to answer that question. And it wasn't like, I want to buy a skyscraper. It wasn't that. I was just trying to figure it out. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I started to learn not only the skyscrapers, but like all these apartment buildings around us, they're owned by people that are not different than you and I. And in a lot of cases, they're just like us. They just got started a little bit sooner. And so that was like, that's really interesting. So I started learning more about that. And the thing that's really cool about real estate is that it's at its core, it's very simple. It's not a complex thing. The pieces, they only go together in so many ways. It's like Legos. You can build anything once you know how they click together. And that's what got me really fired up. Because at that point in my career, I was building a manufacturing business, it's really complicated, a really, really hard thing to build. Whereas real estate, I was like, hey, that seems easy. Not easy, but simple.
Yeah.
And so I bought a triplex and on an FHA loan, house hacked that thing. That was my first investment. I wanted to learn how to operate this little business and then refinanced that, took the proceeds, put it into the next thing, kept rolling that forward. And now we have about 15 million in assets under management. So it's been cool, kind of like seeing how the universe has tried to put it in front of me all these times. And it was just, I don't know, the third time's a charm, I guess, where I finally got the message.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you've got to be in the right place in your life as well, right, for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you could tell sometimes, you could tell a 20-year-old now, hey, buy a duplex, live in one side, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then because they might not be ready for it, right? But by the time they're 30, they might be like, oh, I just got this idea. I can live in one side of the duplex and rent out the other. It depends where you are in life. And I think that makes a difference. But I'm glad you found it. And it's cool that you had that realization, because I had the same realization. I was seeing these big apartments and you always think, oh, it must be these huge companies and just these crazy, like rich people that are buying it. But you then soon realize it's just, like you said, people like you and me that are putting teams together. A group of people are buying these with normal people, with passive investors, people, it's nothing too crazy. And I love what you said there as well. It's like real estate isn't complicated. It's not complicated, but it's hard. It's hard, but it's not complicated, right?
Yep.
Like most people can do real estate if you're willing to do it, if you're willing to put in the work. It's not easy. It's definitely hard because you've got to put in the time, you've got to put in the reps, you've got to, do all that stuff, right? But it's not that complicated, like you said, right? Of course, there's complications to it. I'm not saying you just buy an apartment building and then
it's super easy from the beginning.
Just goes, but like you said, compare it to other businesses. Compare it to, like you said, starting a manufacturing business. There's a lot less moving parts and it's a lot easier to understand. And I think people also like real estate, right? You don't feel how many people say, oh, I hate real estate. Most people say, oh, I love real estate, but I don't have the money or I can't be involved. I don't have the time or I don't understand. That's what it comes down to a lot of times. So I think it's cool to have that realization. How did it go from buying that first property with the FHA loan to now having $15 million of real estate and the management? How did you go from that? What does that look like? What was the process?
So it was just one step at a time. It's like that Indian proverb of like the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so like, I'm a big fan of having big, hairy, audacious out there goals, but then you had to work back to where you are. and then take those next easiest simple steps and break it down in that way. And so the triplex was always just that very first step to learn the process. And then from there it was, okay, let's scale just a little bit bigger. And there came a point then where, like, for me, I really wanted to learn how to do real estate on my own dime before I ever entertained the possibility of partnering with somebody else and taking their money, especially taking like a passive investor's money, because that's a very sacred thing to me. Like, money, like I don't come from I come from like an upper middle class family, but money, like I have a lot of brothers and sisters and I've struggled with the money in the past. And so like I have this relationship with it where I'm very, very frugal, because for every dollar that I spend, I look at it in terms of like what that cost me in my life to earn that. And I think a lot of people think about money in the same way. And so when it comes to investing, like somebody giving you their money, I look at that as like, this isn't their money. This is a portion of their life that they exchanged. And so I really wanted to be like certain that before I ever got to the point of taking somebody's money, that I was good. I knew what I was doing when it came to operating real estate. And so I did that triplex, and then we started scaling up with our own money. And then I partnered with a sibling and then my dad to do one or two deals. Once I had kind of like built up that track record. And it was only once I had probably done 6 or 7 deals at this point that we started entertaining the possibility of bringing in passive investors. And at that point, you know, that's great because you can scale really quickly, and people love the idea of syndication. It's such a sexy topic these days. But I think it's also, there's so many educational programs out there, and I'm not hating on educational programs by any means. Like I've been part of them. I think they're great, but I really think you got to learn and take your licks with your own money and your own life at risk before you take other people. So for me, that was, I really started by honing on my own dime.
Yeah. No, and I respect that and understand that. Yeah, because obviously, like you said, and I like that. I love the way you put that. It's a portion of their life. It's time. It's not just money. They're not giving you $50,000, $100,000 to get to that point to save that $50,000, $100,000. How many hours have they sacrificed? How many hours away from their family? How many
That's exactly it.
days that they got into work when they didn't feel like it? How much stuff have they sacrificed to get to that? And you've got, that's such a great way to put it and to keep that in consideration, because, it's easy to not forget what money is, but it comes in and you're like, okay, I'm doing this deal and blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking about other things, but it's important to remember that money means a lot to these people. And it's, if you can keep that in mind, you're going to treat it a lot differently, I think.
And it's interesting too, because like we have 2 projects that we're doing at the moment. We just raised $2.5 million on one and 1.5 on the other, and you start to get to these big numbers, and you, like you said, you can really lose like the perspective on the value of $1 or what $10 is or 50,000. And it's interesting because the investors that I'm the most connected to typically are our smallest investors. It's the ones that are bringing 50,000 in for the very first time. I'm like, I get you. I feel you. Like, I want to do right by you. And then, our investors that bring $500,000 or 200,000, like, I love them too, no doubt. But there's something about that new investor who's bringing 50,000 for the first time. It's like, I want to do right by you.
Yeah, it probably means more to them as well. Someone who just has 50,000 to invest. It's a lot different, I'm sure. How do you get to the point where you're able to raise it? Are you raising it yourself, or do you have partners that do it? What are the skills that you've created and the systems that you've created to be able to raise capital?
That's a good question. So for us, like, one of our core theses is that whoever's closest to the consumer wins. And so we try at as many points in the relationship with our consumers to cut out middlemen. So we're vertically integrated. We have our own property management company in-house so that we can deliver exceptional results to our residents. And then on the capital raising side, we try to control as much of that in-house as possible. So we very seldomly partner with capital raising partners that aren't part of our organization. Sometimes we do it, but it's usually one capital raiser that brings maybe a couple $100,000 just to kind of fill a gap. But generally, it's something that for us, we want to control all those pieces of the machinery, because as long as you have a middleman in there, And middlemen, they serve a purpose and they could be very good at what they do. So like Hunter Thompson, he's a capital raiser. He's great at what he does. Like, and there are capital raisers out there that just kill it. That's great. For us, we always want to be in control because we don't like to have our destiny in the hands of somebody else and whether they come through or not. So we have like one of our core values is that we own everything that we do. And we mean that in terms of like extreme accountability and ownership, but it allows us to deliver in a way that we can't guarantee if we were relying on other people. So to build that though, it's hard. Like it's easier to scale when you're outsourcing to a third-party property management. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Like I'm not dissing on that or using capital raisers, not at all. Like it's just different strokes for different folks and understanding your personality. And we're just control freaks. That's the end of it for us. But it means that we had to build out these systems from the beginning that we weren't quite ready to utilize, or that they weren't very good systems yet. Like when you're first trying to like build a property management company and you've never done that before, you're like, well, what do we don't know? That's always the big question. And like, what are the systems that we need to put in? So we learned that, and it was slow at the beginning, but now that we've gotten good at that, we're catching up in the race, right? And so you can scale quicker when you outsource initially, but in the long term, I think the tortoise ends up winning that race. And so on the capital raising side, some things, the way that we focus on it is exclusively through content-based marketing that focuses on education and entertainment. So edutainment. We don't try to sell anybody on real estate. I have no interest in trying to sell you real estate at all. I just want to put this out there into the universe, put out as much educational content, because people, once they realize that this is accessible to them and that it's not scary, it's not weird, it's not exotic, they start to sell themselves on it. The light bulb goes off because it makes a lot of sense. And so that's our approach, is put out a ton of awesome educational, entertaining content and just trust that the people that are seeking it will find it. I think Rumi has a great quote that which you seek is seeking you. And remember, like you're seeking capital, but that capital is also seeking you. So our approach is put ourselves in the way of that and just stand at the intersection of luck and preparation and opportunity.
That's awesome. I love that. And like you said, when people realize what this is and how it works, and that it's not a scam, it's not a Ponzi scheme, yeah. It's not multi-level marketing or anything like that, they fall in love with it, I think, because it is such a great investment, because of all the benefits of that. And it's a passive investment, which we'll get into on the second part of this interview, what that means and what that looks like. But it's just such a great benefit to people, especially the right person. I say a busy professional who's making a lot of money, who doesn't know what to do with it, and is, doesn't like the stock market maybe, and is earning nothing at the bank, losing money at the bank, and they like real estate, but they don't have the time. It's just makes a lot of sense for a lot of people, I think, and I love that you guys are educating people on that. Man, this has gone by quick. It's been a fun interview. I thought this would happen because we were talking beforehand. There was such an easy comment, so I thought this would happen. But now we get into the part of the show where I like to ask some wrestling-related real estate questions, and I think you'll be good at this. So I'm excited for your answer. The first question is, what would your wrestling name be?
Oh man, shoot! I should have prepared for this.
I don't know if you used to watch wrestling. They all had crazy names, like Jake the Snake Roberts. Okay.
I watched a lot. I watched a lot. Okay. I think every little boy that grew up in like the 80s and the 90s probably did.
Yeah.
What would my wrestling name be though? It would probably be this is embarrassing, but
that's better.
So I had this so I used to be, a dirtbag rock climber. Like when we say professional rock climber, that sounds a whole lot more glorious than it really is. But one of the things about it is that you just live in the dirt all the time, and you're just out there kind of like scrappy. And so my nickname that my friends had for me was Scrappy Doo, which is like, like Scooby-Doo's little nephew, maybe, Scrappy Doo.
Yeah, I remember Scrappy. Yeah, I remember Scrappy actually. Yeah. He's one that always wanted to fight, right? He was always mad.
Exactly. Little Scrappy Doo. He's like the little tiny little guy. That would probably be me. I'm like not a very big guy at all. So like maybe like Scrappy Doo.
Okay, I like that.
I would not be like the serious character. That's for sure.
That's awesome. So every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move in real estate? So, you know, in a wrestling match, when a wrestler hits his special move, the match is over. You know, like The Undertaker had the choke slam. When he hit that, everybody, or the tombstone, everybody knew the match was over.
Scorpion Death Lock.
Yeah. What would yours be in real estate? What is your strength, essentially? What is your superpower?
Hyper focus. So when I go into hyper focus, that's definitely my competitive advantage. And so it's interesting, you know, I mentioned that I have ADHD, and one of the unique things about that is people think it means that we don't have the ability to focus. And that's not true. It just means that we don't have the ability to always control where we're focused. But when we're focused on something, we go into what's known as a hyper focused state. And it's a lot like the flow state. Like when you're in the zone, and you're like operating at all cylinders and you just feel one with the universe, like that flow state, it's magical. That's what hyper focus is like for somebody with ADHD. So it sucks in the sense that like you can get into hyper focused state on some really stupid things if you're not careful. Like, and this is why people with ADHD, they'll stay in a burning house as it literally burns down around them because they're so locked in on what they're focused on. And so that's my thing, is like hyper focus for sure. And that's something I'm really interested in helping people, not only with ADHD, but just generally helping people that struggle with distraction and procrastination, help them figure out how to overcome that. Because you always hear that time is like your most precious resource, but I don't think that's true. I think your attention is, like, where you put it is the most important resource that you have.
Yeah, so true, so true, so true. Yeah, because you can have all the time in the world, but if you're just not paying attention to what matters or whatever, it's the time just is. Yeah, very cool, very cool.
So if this was like a science fiction wrestling match, then I would assume that I would go into like this like lasers coming out of my head like type thing.
That's awesome. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in real estate?
You know, it's so interesting. Like right now, we are getting kicked in the kneecaps repeatedly on a deal from the banks. And it's hard because you can't control what the bank is your most important partner. Always. They're bringing the majority of the money to the table. And so you have to bend over in a lot of cases and do what they ask. And that can be really frustrating because it just feels so out of your control. And we're a company, we're individuals that really focus on extreme accountability and trying to own our side of what we can do better. And this is an opportunity for us to look at it and say, you know, sometimes it's outside of your control, and that's okay too. You have to be able to just go with the punches sometimes and react and adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question is a little bit of a mindset one. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I did actually. This is interesting. So before I did that first triplex, my first deal on my own, I was going to do it with my best friend. We had a quad under contract, and in the weeks leading up to closing, things just didn't feel right to me there was so much tension and friction in the friendship at that point, because one, we both had the same strengths and the same weaknesses. And so we were both trying to do the same things and not do the other things. And so balls were already getting dropped. We didn't even have the property under contract, and we were not communicating well. And so literally the day before closing, I was standing on the turnbuckle and I decided just to get down. Like I just got off the turnbuckle and like walked back to the dressing room. And I told him, I pulled the plug. I was like, I can't do this. And so, you know, I gave up the earnest money, and like the friendship took a big hit because I was like, this is not the right play for us long-term. If we go into this, the issues that we're already having are only going to get exacerbated. I firmly believe that things that start hard, they end hard. And especially when it comes to relationships and partnerships, you have to be cognizant of that. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself trying to do like, what's like Rey Mysterio's like big move off the turnbuckle, but then there's like nobody underneath of you. So like you just face plant.
Right. Yeah. And partnerships, you know, like a million times over, it's like a marriage, right? And if you start off rocky, it's only probably going to get worse. So yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks for sharing all that cool, very cool story. Like I said, that time flew by so much. But if people want to get in touch with you, if people want to find out more about what you guys got going on, how can they get in touch? How can they find out more?
Yeah. So find us over at invictusmultifamily.com, or you can find me at anthonyvicino.com. And I am literally on social media too much. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. If you have questions or just, want to chat, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to. So
perfect. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much. Thank you, Scrappy Doo. That was awesome.